Welcome to the Delight Your Marriage podcast. You're joining me, Bella Rose, as I dive deep into the beauty, power, and truths about intimacy. Learn not only the practicals, but the heart behind what making love is all about. Delight your marriage. Hey there, welcome. This is Bella, and I just hope you're having a great day. And, you know, the joy of the Lord is our strength. Whatever you're going through today, truth is the thing that helps us to hold on in the hard. There are people around the world, even today, that are suffering for the sake of Jesus, suffering physically in their body. Paul talks about that even suffering physically is a whole nother level of suffering for Jesus. And for the most part, at least if you're listening to my voice, you likely have never physically been subject to persecution. Likely. But there are many people around the world that are. And so I just want to encourage you that I don't know when Jesus is coming back. Some think it's very soon. I don't have an opinion, but I do know that if it's not me, it's my kids. If it's not my kids, it's my kids' kids. If it's not my kids' kids. I mean, somehow, some way, what I do and what you do and how you think of who Jesus is and how he impacts your life will matter to the people that will have to be persecuted for their faith in a much larger degree than you do right now. Because we know the story gets hard. We know if you look at Matthew 24, it's going to get harder. And we know the end of the story. We know that Jesus is the king and he wins and we'll be with him forever, which is going to be glorious and wonderful. But for now, we want to discipline our thoughts, our heart, what we do on a day-to-day, so that we're ready when it actually gets hard. I'm not saying your life isn't hard. You have suffering. I have suffering. We do. And yet, Paul and Silas sang in the midst of prison, and the walls came down. The walls didn't come down. The actual prison doors were open, and an earthquake happened. But my goodness, they were singing after being flogged for the sake of the gospel, put in prison. I mean, it wasn't comfortable. And so if God can give them that grace, God can give you the grace that you need today in your marriage to do it Jesus' way. So that's what we're going to talk about. Someone asked me the other day on a coaching call, how do I decide what I'm going to talk about on the podcast? And sometimes it's a sense of what I keep seeing in clients or in people who reach out to us, and it just seems like, wow, there's a gap here in how people understand something. And gosh, I would love to speak into that. I would love to impact the way folks are thinking, or maybe they need encouragement in a certain way. And I just want to be there to encourage and say, you're doing great. Keep going. Dig in. You're doing the right thing. And I think that's what today is. Jesus is, somebody actually said this in a coaching call recently. Was it yesterday maybe? It was marvelous. Jesus really was a human. He really was a human. So the pains and the suffering, and again, he suffered more than us, but the day in and day out difficulty and frustrations and loneliness and no one understands me and, oh Lord, this is so hard, which I go through and I know you go through. But Jesus went through that. He did. He wasn't exempt from every single bit of temptation that you are. Temptation to get angry, temptation to sin, temptation for lust, temptation for self-centeredness. And we all have that. None of us have arrived. If we think there is no sin in us, the truth is not in us. If we think we're totally righteous, we don't actually understand who God is. He's that holy. He's that good. He's that other. He's so much better than us. But Jesus experienced every single temptation that we did, that we do. And yet he did not sin. And I don't know how much you know about where our culture is right now, but the ethic of folks that really are into social justice, which is a good thing. There's good to it, but the ethic behind it is actually founded in Christian beliefs. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. That's Jesus' way. The problem is when you take Jesus out of it, you want all the good that Jesus gives, but not the pick up your cross and follow me. Think of others as better than yourself. Actually serve from your heart. Don't just do it with your lips only. And then the fact that we need atonement for our sins. We need somebody to take our place, because justice isn't justice unless the evil that we've done is rightfully dealt with. So this is all getting me to the place where Jesus tells us to serve. He tells us to serve. He says the greatest is actually the servant. And Jesus modeled this. The greatest is actually the servant. Now, what does it mean to be a servant to your spouse? It might look differently than what you assume the word servant looks like. Because Jesus still had a separate kind of life, in that he would escape away from people who really needed him so he could prioritize time with the Father. He knew that was vital. He knew it was vital for his ministry to get away and to be. And there are times he wasn't with his disciples. I don't know if you've seen The Chosen. I've seen a couple of seasons. I haven't seen all of it, but I really liked it. I really did, for lots of reasons. But one of the, which is so true, is he wasn't always with his disciples. There were times that he was writing in the dirt by himself, or he went to the well by himself. There are experiences that he was not around a bunch of folks. And there were lots of times that he was around a bunch of folks. And there were times that he literally escaped and the disciples didn't know where he was and the crowds didn't know where he was and they were trying to find him. And so does the servant of all mean that you do whatever anyone else wants you to do? I don't think so. I think Jesus really knew what they needed, and he was there for that. He loved them well. And so when you're looking at your spouse and you're looking at, what does God require of me? What does God require of me? Loving your spouse well, the way they receive love, what they actually need. Maybe they don't need you to bow to their every whim. Maybe that's not actually what they need. Maybe they need you to love them well, to wisely love them. Maybe they don't need you to do whatever they say. Maybe they need you to listen and be impacted by what they say. But maybe you're going to say, you know what? Thank you so much for sharing this. I know this is important to you. I'm going to think about this and circle back. I want to pray on this and circle back. Thank you for speaking your heart to me. It really does matter. And then you have time to pause, and they have time to pause. We can't take everything someone else says at face value, especially in the midst of emotion In an argument, I don't know about you, but I've said things I didn't mean in the midst of strong emotion. Sometimes I'm frustrated at something completely other than my spouse, and I bring an issue to my spouse that really, if I look at it the next day after I sleep, suddenly I'm like, oh, that wasn't really about my spouse. I was actually frustrated because I didn't have a good transition time from work to home. Or I was actually frustrated because I was distracted by something that was on my phone. Or I was actually frustrated because something happened with my family member and it really unsettled me. And so I'm in a bad frame of mind. And it really is all up in me. And it doesn't have to do with my spouse. And so if my husband responded to exactly what I said, and he just bowed, emotionally to me, if you will, like, what is the word? Bowed in terms of relented, like did whatever I told him to do, then likely it wouldn't have fixed anything. I would have still been just upset, and I wouldn't have realized that, oh my gosh, this is me bringing something foul to our relationship. Doesn't mean that he should have called me out and been harsh with me and said, this has nothing to do with me. Why'd you just come in here all grumpy and grouchy? And likely that wouldn't have helped either. So being a servant to me is actually giving me what I need. And what I need in the moment of frustration and anger or sadness, despair, all that, what I really need is a friend. I need him to listen. I need him to care. Not that he needs to jump in and fix it even. He might just need to listen, which is the friendship I'm seeking. And I don't want him to take it personally. So many times men take their wives' emotions personally. She's having a rough day and he assumes it's his fault. And so he comes into, let's say she's texting him, things that clearly show she's frustrated. She comes home and he is upset because he assumes that she's upset at him, and she isn't. She's not. She's not thinking about him. She's thinking about the thing that upset her. And so if we can get ourselves not front and center and assume everything is about us, which I know, that's hard. But if we don't assume it's about us and we assume something's going on with them in a curious way, in a concerned way, in a loving way. How are you, honey? Oh, I hear you. Something's bothering you. I can tell what's going on. And she might unload all sorts of negativity on you, but you need to stay in the zone of realizing there might be more to this story. There might be more to this story. There might be reactions to something that has nothing to do with even what they're saying. You might not be able to take things at face value. And that's with every person. That's with your spouse. That's with every single person. A lot of times we say that to our sons when something happens that, we live in New York City, so there's a lot of interactions with strangers. And sometimes, people are screaming at each other, and it scares my boys. Screaming at other people, it's scary at times. And we just want to constantly remind them, something's going on for them. Something's going on. People who are not happy about their lives often take it out on other people. And we want to realize that same kind of grace and mindset we want to have with our spouse. Serving our spouse well, loving them in the midst of some ugliness means not taking it personally, not assuming, oh my gosh, my spouse is so evil because all their da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Instead, something must be going on. I hope they're okay. You all right, honey? What's going on? Even if that's in the midst of your spouse taking it out on you. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to ignore the content, but it does mean you should listen well, be there for it, and process it. Literally pray about it. Lord, is this me? Or is this something that they were just dealing with, maybe something else, and I need to pause and think about it later? I really invite you to slow conversations down. Listen really well. And it all starts with a curious mindset. Curious. This is your spouse, for God's sake. This is the one that's most important in your life. And I invite you to have a transition time between work and home. Really. Whether you commute, that's a perfect time to transition. A lot of times people use commuting time to listen to me, so thank you. But turn me off at least 10 minutes before you get to the house so you can process and just say, Lord, I'm about to enter the most important space of my life. I'm going from work, which is far less important than the humans that 100% I know I am assigned to. My spouse and my kids. I'm about to transition. Lord, help me. Help me to be present. Help me to put work and distraction and learning and all the good that you're doing elsewhere. Help me to put that on the back burner. Yes, even ministry work. Let me put that on the back burner and recognize this human in front of me is more important. I might have shared this on the podcast before, but I have I like to call it an impulse control bucket. Yes, I have come to the realization that I have an addictive personality, and some people do. Great. Some people don't, and great. Good. Let's recognize we all have thorns in the flesh, and that is definitely mine. And so I'm ruthless, though. Like my thorn in the flesh, I want to name it. I want to accept it for its limits, because if I don't, then it's just going to sneak up on me and I'm not going to be able to do what ultimately God wants me to do, because I'll just have addictions all over the place. And if ever, this is funny, but if ever, God willing, this won't happen, but if ever anyone decided to do a documentary of my life and they found out who I actually was in every sphere, I want it to be godly. I want the reputation of Jesus to be honored in every sphere of my life. I don't want to be a situational Christian. I don't want to be in certain situations. I was an appropriate Jesus follower, but in certain situations, driving, come on. Who's a Christian behind the wheel? Now, this is speaking to men generally, not all. But some men, they just throw it out. Like once you're behind the wheel, boom. Let's get aggressive. Let's get our words all out of place. Let's be rude to the other drivers. Let's not assume the best in them. Oh, no. They clearly cut you off because they're the jerks from the underworld. Who knows? It just gets crazy. Same with talking to service representatives on the phone. And that is me in the past, and I really have to crucify my flesh before I get on the phone with any kind of service rep, because the truth is they're just representing a company. We're not talking to the CEO that it can actually influence change. We're talking to someone who just wants to feed their family. A lot of times they're probably in a country that is has a harder life than you, probably paid less than you. I mean, there's let's have compassion on humans. We're not dealing with robots. We don't want to be situational Christians. But it starts with when we slow down, when we're a servant to our spouse, we learn to treat all humans differently. When we're good at apologizing, we apologize to our friends more freely. We apologize to the servant representatives that we got a little testy with more easily. These are precious souls. However you interact with them, they're precious souls. So yeah, I like doing thought experiments like, if ever there was a documentary made of my life, what would be true of me? There's a couple other thought experiments. If this particular situation was written on a billboard or on a Facebook page, whatever's an effective thought thing. But if this was written all over, some big newspaper that everyone reads or some big online whatever, would I be proud of myself? And that's the way you want to live behind closed doors. You do influence others. Your primary job is evangelism to your own family. You represent Jesus, whether you're a husband or a wife. 1 Corinthians 7 is very clear that you have an opportunity to win your spouse to Jesus based on how you treat them. And you and I both know that that's exactly the case with our children. If we are not changed because of our relationship with Jesus, your kids are smart. And they're going to say, it doesn't matter. It didn't matter that my parents went to church every Sunday. They were still mean to da-da-da-da-da-da-da. They didn't follow Jesus Monday to Saturday night. It didn't affect the way they thought. It didn't affect the way they treated others. Your primary evangelism is to those that are closest to you. And the thing is, here's another mental way that's going to help you make better choices. It comes from Kant, the philosopher. If everyone did that, would it be right? If every Christian evangelized their family first by the way they lived, by their heart posture towards others, by how they sacrificed, by how they served, we wouldn't have this broken follower of Jesus culture. And it's not broken. There's plenty of good in Christian circles and in Christian community. And there's a lot of good. But the fact that there's some not, which I'm sure you've experienced or heard about, if we just really, really focused on doing our little and doing it well, that was Jesus' way. Jesus didn't even have a giant ministry. He was around for 3 years. He didn't even go more than he didn't even travel too many miles away from his hometown. I mean, nowadays we can go to any continent in the world. Jesus didn't travel to most of them. He had several hundred miles maybe that he traversed in his life. He didn't go to the Americas. He didn't go to the deeper Africa, as far as we know. I mean, he wasn't in Asia. Why? Maybe God himself decided limits were a good thing, that we are not all called to everything. And so your goals don't have to be as giant maybe as you think they need to be. Some people, maybe goals are really, really important but motivating and all that. I'm one of those, but really to put our goals in perspective. If we can't live a life worthy of his calling in every realm, our goals need to be tampered, if that's the word. They need to be aligned with God's way, his pace. Jesus was slow. He was even interruptible. I love that phrase. He didn't waste time on things that didn't matter, which unfortunately is what happens a lot here in our day and age. But he was slow enough that when someone interrupted him, okay, I'll go to your house. Someone interrupted, oh, okay, I'll go heal your person. I mean, it was amazing. It's amazing. Be the servant of your spouse, and it's going to trickle into every other aspect of your life. Don't try to be servant of everyone else and ignore your highest human assignments. It will trickle into every other if you get your priorities right. And servant, see what that means in Jesus' life. What did it mean to serve? Because you might be understanding it a little bit falsely. You've got to have your relationship with God first. then your spouse, then your kids, then your ministry, then your work, then whatever it looks like. Let me pray for you. Father, you weren't kidding when you said the greatest is the servant of all. So, Father, I pray for this one, that they would be great in your eyes, regardless of what it looks like in the world, regardless of what our culture says is great. You decide what's great, and you said the servant of all. It's not really popular to be a servant to your spouse nowadays. That sounds like oppression. But my goodness, would you teach us to serve? Would you teach us to serve so that at the end of it all, you say, well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful in the small. Lord, I pray we'd be faithful in the small, in the situations that it seems like no one's watching, in the situations where our hearts turn to bitterness or annoyance or pride, and my goodness, my heart gets there. Lord, help us to confess our sins, be prayed for, and get healed so that our heart is more pure before you, Jesus, because that's what it is. That's what it's really about, our hearts being close to you. We don't want to honor you with our lips, but our hearts are far from you, God. Tenderize us to go closer to who you are. And let it start at home. That who we are is so evident to our spouse and our kids that it draws them to you. We love you, Jesus. Amen. We would love to help you if you're ready to take the next step to learn how to be the spouse that God is inviting you to be in every area. We would love to help you. If you've heard any of the transformation stories, God gets all the glory. And the thing is, it's about pursuing God rightly, wisely, and the byproduct so often we see is an amazing marriage. And we would love that for you because we believe at Delight Your Marriage that you can do God's will better if you have an amazing marriage. Truly. So we'd love to help you. DelightYourMarriage.com/cc. You learn all the information and we will be excited to serve you. That's a free call. DelightYourMarriage.com/cc. God bless.